as we look toward the start area where all of the elite runners are held. And it's a much different scene than normal here in Tokyo. It's pretty jarring just to see about 190 athletes on the start line instead of the full field. Nevertheless, we are primed for some great racing. When you heard these runners talk about what they expected today, they all expected the race to be paced and run under the course record time of 2:03:58.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, what impact the lack of spectators will have, particularly on the Japanese runners. So much at stake for them. I would think that they would be buoyed by the reaction and the fervor of the crowd. That will not be the case here. And this is, you mentioned it, it is a stark contrast to almost any event you would see on a major marathon tour, but definitely taking some precautions. The elite athletes being the ones that will toe the line and get this Tokyo Marathon underway.
First World Marathon Major of 2020 set to go. Will we see a sub 2:02 time today? That's been mentioned by a couple of the athletes. Again, anything 2:03:58 or under would set the course record, as Hiroshi Yokokawa readies us, and the Tokyo Marathon is underway in 2020. For those Japanese runners, Paul, who are targeting that marathon record time of 2:05:50, the Japanese national record, and that final Olympic spot, how do you balance the need for a record time with making sure you don't overcook it the first few miles and then just blow yourself out by the end of the marathon?
Well, the advantage will be the guys you see in the brighter singlets, and those are the pace setters. They do have them here in Tokyo, and they've set up not only pacers for that group that's kind of trying to attack that 2:02, 2:03, but they're also pacers for that 2:05:50 or better that is needed from the Japanese. So the smartest thing they can do is just kind of settle in on those pace setters and let them drive the pace early on in this race.
It is 47 degrees at the start. Temperature going to go up to roughly 60 degrees. It's a 9 a.m. start in Tokyo. Again, last year it was one of the coldest days ever for the Tokyo Marathon. The rain was coming down throughout the course of it, so it was a really tough running day. This year, you really couldn't ask for better conditions to run this race and run it fast.
No question. And then, the changes in the course, and we'll go into the course in greater detail coming up here shortly, but they made a switch in 2017, seeing what was happening in places like London, what was obviously happening over and over again in places like Berlin, where the world record has been broken many times. This is now a much faster track, and the benefit here is going to be fast times under these types of conditions.
You mentioned those pacers who are out in front. They're targeting a 2:03 time today, so 58 seconds faster than the course record. Solomon Diego, Ruben Kiprop, and William Wanjiku doing a lot of that pacing work. And then pacing that 2:05:50 time, the Japanese national record, is Tetsuya Yorikazu. So those runners who were thinking about that third and final Japanese Olympic spot will likely find themselves attached to Yorikazu, at least for the early portion of this race.
Well, and we'll see some quick decompression of this lead group as those faster pacers kind of take that group of about 10, 11 elite athletes looking for something a little bit faster, and then the rest of the field you see behind them is basically the contingent here from Japan, led by Osaka and Shitara.
Right now, Berhanu Legesse is leading the field behind the pacers. He said coming in, he had a perfect build up to this race. Said he was targeting 2:02 low, and anything slower than that would be a major disappointment. So he's looking for a win, he's looking for a course record, and he's looking to go sub 2:03 today on a perfect day for racing in Tokyo. He and Katana Mola are your top two as we are just underway at the 2020 Tokyo Marathon. All right, Paul, they changed the course in 2017 to make this Tokyo Marathon course a little bit flatter and a little bit faster. Walk us through these 26.2 miles.
Well, I'll run you through it here really quickly. They start at the Tokyo Metropolitan Government Building and go all the way down to Tokyo Station. Used to go over the river several times, and those bridges are where you get a little bit of elevation. Now you're just getting a couple of trips over the bridges. That halfway point sends them back to the north, and then they come back into the center of Tokyo, down around the Tokyo Tower to the south, and then this great finish in front of Tokyo Station and the Imperial Palace. Just a very quick left turn there, and then just about 100 meters to the finish.
Yeah, the course record is obviously lowered since they made the move to this course in 2017. That's when Wilson Kipsang set the men's course record, 2:03.58. Sarah Chepchirchir holds the women's record, 2:19.47. There is bonus prize money for anyone who breaks the course record today.
And there's a good look at Suguru Osako of Japan, has trained in the United States with Coach Pete Julian. Talking to Pete going into this race, Osako coming off a pretty good base of training over in Africa, says he feels good, and you know, the decision he makes to come into this race, it's his spot to lose, and I guess the best way you can potentially control that is to be in this race with the leaders. And again, as we said at the outset, got to break his record to make the team, and he's going to be just kind of keeping track of pace and maybe doing the math in his head as this race goes on.
Well, and there are a few different ways he could run this race, Paul. If he just wanted to make sure he was following some of the other contenders like Yuta Shitara that you see here, he could watch and make sure he was with them the whole way. Or, you know, he could go out and just try to run a fast race and say, I don't think anyone can keep up with me. If you at least listen to him talk on Friday, he wasn't talking at all about the race for the final Olympic spot. He was talking about the overall race. He said he wanted to get his first major marathon win here in Tokyo. It's a little bit optimistic when you see his national record of 2:05.50 compared to some of the other PRs in this field. But he spent the last couple months in Kenya, like you said, and he feels like he's as strong as he's been.
And we should mention this third individual, the red singlet in the middle of the picture, Hiroto Inoue, who probably has the capabilities of being in the mix for that mark. He's obviously being a little bit more aggressive, as he is right behind the defending champion Berhanu Legacy at this point. He was 12th in the Boston Marathon last year, but in a disappointing finish to the trials which occurred last fall, he finished in 27th. But the Federation has given yet this unique and extra opportunity to get a spot on the team, and it does require to be the fastest marathoner ever in Japan.
Yeah, the first two finishers in those trials got automatic spots. That was Shogo Nakamura and Yuma Hattori. Suguru Osako finished third, which is why he holds that conditional third spot. He was passed in the final couple hundred meters. He had second place locked up, and Hattori ran him down at the end. So that's why he has to run this race and hold on to that third shot. Inoue, who is still tucked in right behind Legacy, would have to drop his PR by about a minute, but at Friday's press conference, they asked each athlete to give us their target time. Suguru Osako said, I'm 2:0 question mark, question mark, question mark. He didn't want to give anything away. Yuta Shitara, interestingly, said, I'm 2:06.10, which wouldn't even be enough to get him into the Olympic Games. Hiroto Inoue said 2:04.30 was his target time, which would be almost a 2.5-minute improvement to his PR.
Well, you got to like his aggressiveness and the attitude going into this race, but we'll see how this obviously plays out early on. You know, Osako didn't actually finish last year's race, dropped out with some issues in about the 30-kilometer mark, and, you know, didn't talk about it with his coach, but in theory, if the pace were to slow somehow and he felt maybe that the mark was not in reach, I suppose he could elect to shut it down. I mean, he misses an opportunity to run another marathon on the spring schedule. Most of these marathon athletes are going to do 2 a year, and kind of had to come here to Tokyo as the choice, and maybe it wasn't his first choice necessarily.
Shitara is still kind of tucked right in behind Osaka, about 12 or 13 athletes back. It's Berhanu Legacy looking very comfortable out in the top spot, Inoue behind him, and then Gettin Amola, the 26-year-old from Ethiopia that folks are really excited about. He had that blistering debut in Dubai last year where he ran 2:03.34, the fastest ever marathon debut, and now we get to see him again in a marathon and see how he's grown over the last year or so.
Well, we always talk about the World Marathon Majors in London and Berlin giving athletes a fast track, but everyone knows that Dubai has always been a place where people can run fast. So yeah, you said it. He's got at least a good pedigree with that first marathon. This just his second. He's also still running on the track. He was on U.S. soil just a few months ago, running at the Prefontaine Classic, staged last year at Stanford University, finishing 8th in the 2-mile.
Here's a look at the women's field. Ruti Aga tucked in right behind the pace leaders, last year's defending champ. Also there in front, Valerie Ayebe, the 28-year-old from Kenya who won the Frankfurt Marathon last year. And Israel's Lona Chemtai Salpeter was born in Kenya, races for Israel, and has the Israeli national record of 2:19:46. Still a tight bunch of all the women's elite runners, all 13 who started still together as we are still very early on in the 2020 Tokyo Marathon. Tokyo, part of the Abbott World Marathon Majors Series. Each year the series starts and ends in the same city. They rotate each season, so Series 13 started in Chicago. It will end in Chicago in October.
And great prize money structure for all the athletes and all of the classifications. Take your 2 best finishes in any of these marathons. That gives you your maximum point value, and if you have 50, you're usually in a good spot to win.
And for a lot of these marathoners, honored just to get invited to an Abbott World Marathon Majors race. There are a few runners today in their first one, just trying to get their feet wet against elite competition like this and work their way towards potentially winning World Marathon Majors. So we're coming up on almost 5 kilometers into this race, and Berhanu Legesse still tucked into a good spot as you see where the track and field events will take place during the Tokyo 2020 Games. The new National Stadium looking gleaming at this point here on March 1st in Tokyo.
Spectacular venue, and it'll be the epicenter for all things track and field in the summer of 2020.
So Berhanu Legesse still tucked right in behind Solomon Kurwiego, the pacer, and he's been there the entire way. Next to him, Gatnamola, and then Dixon Chumba, who knows these roads of Tokyo as well as anybody, the only man to win this race twice, and he's run it every year since 2014, so this is his 7th consecutive start. He's finished in the top 3 in each of the first 6 starts for him here in Tokyo.
Yeah, 2 wins, 4 third-place finishes. He's just been rock solid, and when you have something good like that going, just keep the streak alive.
What do you think about Suguru Asako's body language early on here? He played off the pressure, but you have to imagine that he's feeling a lot of heat, knowing that every one of his countrymen who's out there running against him is taking aim at his Olympic spot and his national record.
Well, you mentioned pressure, and I think because of his body of work and his national records both on the track and on the roads, yeah, I think people came into us expecting he would represent the country at the Olympic Games. So the added pressure now of having to see this race play out and hope that everyone can stay above his record. But he looks comfortable to me. I mean, he's really kind of just got himself into that rhythm as the gap now begins to break up a little bit between that lead group and the elite Japanese men.
They went through 5K at 14:30. So through the opening 5K of 42.195K, that again converts to 26.2 miles here at the Tokyo Marathon.
Yeah, so early pace there, about 2:03. There's a little bit of a drop in this first part of the race course before it becomes very flat.
Well, and right after that 5K mark, a couple of runners decided to overtake the pacers here, so maybe not necessarily going quite as fast as they wanted. It's also been interesting to watch. Osako and Inoue have stuck with the lead group and the 2:03 pacers. Meanwhile, Shitara has stayed behind the 2:05.50 pacers, knowing that if he runs 2:05.50 or better, he's likely to get the spot, but if Osako finishes ahead of him or Inoue finishes ahead of him, 2:05.50 might not be enough.
No, and I think that's probably Osako's idea here is, you know, as long as I stay ahead of them, a little bit of water bottle sharing there, you know, going into that first aid station. Looked like there was some confusion among some of these elite athletes. There are bottles that are specifically made up for each of the athletes, so you want to get the right bottle. Maybe not as big a disaster to have a missed bottle early in the race. It's towards the end where some of that can really make a difference on those tired legs in those final few miles.
That was Asifa Mengstu who took the bottle away from Osaka. Mengstu, 32 years old, from Ethiopia, second in Paris and third in both Dubai and Chicago last year. Another one of the runners from Ethiopia looking to make an impression on the Ethiopian Federation and earn his spot on the Tokyo 2020 team.
Yeah, I mean, an abundance of riches for the countries of Kenya and Ethiopia. Mengsu, top 20 all-time in this event, but may be hard-pressed to make the team given the likes of some of the other athletes, not only in this field.
Other runner that's moved up toward the front is the big, tall, lanky Titus Akiru, the 28-year-old from Kenya, who's a reserve selection for the Kenyan Olympic team. Right now, Kenya is planning on sending Eliud Kipchoge along with Amos Kipruto and Lawrence Chirono, but if one of those three is unable to run in Tokyo, Akuru is standing by. He also is the record holder for the fastest marathon ever in the state of Hawaii, breaking the record at the Honolulu Marathon last year.
Yeah, that record had stood for 27 years, ran sub 208 in a tropical condition that's not necessarily conducive to a lot of good marathon running, but that was a surprise result, I think, for Akiru, who's had some success there previously, but the time that he posted this year definitely turned a lot of heads and obviously put him in a position to be one of the favorites here today in Tokyo. And
all the favorites still here. Just saw Sisay Lema pop up into the top 5 as well, the 29-year-old from Ethiopia who ran 2:03.36 to finish 3rd in Berlin last year.
And Bill, through that first 5K, sort of right around the 2:03 mark. So as was instructed by the pace setters, they're doing their job early. And Asako, the only Japanese athlete that's kind of going with the group along with Inoue. Be interesting to see how this unfolds.